and whatever.
Okay.
All right. Okay, episode 12 here, coming at you. And we're talking about the called out ones, Ecclesia, the New Testament church. So we're going to start pretty broad here and get into it a little bit with our panel. We've got Muhib sitting to my left. Is that stage right? And I got Dennis here, both ordained young gentlemen in ministry in different ways. Dennis, Mr. Family Man, business, hardworking dude. You're a builder, right?
I'm a builder, yeah.
You're anyways.
And we have the new guy behind the scene.
Yeah, I got a new tech man. And Sebastian's in the studio with us, helping us out here, making everything run smooth and making us sound beautiful and intelligent.
Yes.
All right.
That's what the editing's for.
Yeah. Right. So, hey, so we want to talk about the church, and that's a big subject, and maybe needs to be tackled. I think so.
Yeah, amen.
Just recently, the church was kind of brought into the discussion in media when Notre Dame was lit on fire, and they're saying, some reporting is saying, okay, guys were smoking on the job site, but there's no way a cigarette started that. So they're wondering if this wasn't an attack, and I don't think we have any definition yet. We know for sure that there have been attacks on the church's literal physical buildings.
Right.
Recently, some guy tried to walk into a New York City church with gasoline or something,
Or even recently, the tragic in Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So there's these attacks on the churches, the buildings, and then there's these attacks on Christians.
Right.
Oh, no, wait, Easter worshipers.
Yes.
That's what they're called, right?
Yeah.
That's a little, okay, that's going off of a recent Obama and Hillary Clinton tweet. But, yeah, no, there's definitely an attack on the church. Isn't that interesting? Literally right now. It's in the news.
We can even be liberal and say places of worship, because we have a synagogue was attacked.
That's right.
The incident also in is it
California?
No, that country near Australia. They're gonna get mad at me now.
New Zealand?
New Zealand, yeah.
Is that what it is? That country near
That
Australia?
country near Australia. If you're
Oh
from
my
New Zealand,
gosh.
I'm sorry.
That's awesome.
No disrespect here.
I mean, is there people there?
There are people there.
That's where the wait.
So-
That's where the Shire is, right?
That's where the Shire
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So,
But if we look
right.
at the church, it's interesting because you can look at it in several different ways. But if you think about the attacks, like there's a physical attack, an outside attack.
Right.
But there's also like an attack, from the inside. So we could look at the church, we could say it's being attacked. We could say physically it's being attacked. We could say spiritually it's being attacked from, people trying to hurt us spiritually.
Right.
We could also say people inside of the church proper, inside the local assembly are trying to hurt us. And also we could say that there's a real spiritual battle out there because there is a God who loves us, and that also means that there's a devil who hates us.
Right.
And he's trying to do everything he can to destroy the church, because if the church is destroyed, then the image of God can be destroyed.
Yeah.
So I think, right now, for us to defend the church, and we could say defend the local assembly and the fact that I go to an actual location versus watching it on the internet on a Sunday morning, to defend this whole idea is like so important, because Satan has this idea that if he could, taint the image of the church, then he can taint the image of God. And I think in many people, we see people leaving the church, and if you ask them, it's because they have a tainted image of who God is.
Yeah.
And how God has been expressed to the church.
Right.
It's really interesting.
that's the toughest group of people to reach, are those that were once in the church but left, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the Apostle Paul, you guys could kind of help me, but he says it might have been even better for you guys to never even believed, which is kind of a hard statement.
I was trying hard not to start with this, but I have it in my heart. I'm going to start in trouble. But it's good, because when we read our New Testament, you guys are Bible readers. We see the church, first century, they met in homes. Like, it's fine. They met in, like, homes. Romans 15:5. Philemon, I think it's only one chapter 1 verse. I have this reference here. I don't want to just miss. because I know some people listening, maybe they
You're going
want
to
their
talk about the house church
Philemon
thing,
1,
right?
2. Yeah.
Okay.
So, because it's totally fine if two people gathered to worship Christ, to have a church, they can have it anywhere. This is like the shocking thing. Like, they can have it in the house, actually. It's
Which
fine.
is like, amen. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true.
But
But
we go back to what you just said about the motivation. If they're leaving the church, the established church, like the organized church, hurt, and their motivation is to correct, like, an image they had of the church when they left by having a house church in order to reform what is really established. Now we can say to them, you really need to check your heart. So you're having a church in your house because you think there's something wrong with a established church somewhere. That's where we can have a discussion and say, you really need to check your heart.
Yeah. Well, I think it's amazing because when you open the Bible, you read about 50 different churches in the New Testament that were, quote unquote, established. And some of them were larger, some of them were much smaller.
Right.
The church in Jerusalem was, pretty large.
Right.
And we could say that it would typify an established church, right? And we see that actually inside of the organization of this church of Jerusalem, there was controversy. I mean, they argued about the law versus grace.
Yeah.
Should Gentiles be circumcised? So there were these controversies that were being dealt with. But does that mean, that I run away and let me explain it this way. I lived in Asia for 10 years, and there's not a lot of pastors, but there's a lot of people who love God.
Yes.
And they are so beautiful. They're beautiful believers, but they don't know the Bible at all. So what will happen is that a group of these believers will get together, and it will grow. It could become, 30 or 40 people in a little house church, and they meet every Sunday, and they take turns to read the Bible and to share.
Right.
And what happens is somebody becomes stronger, and they have a different doctrine than this other person does, and then there's a church split.
Yeah.
Why does the church split? It's not because of growth. It's not because of the Spirit. It's because there is not unity.
Yeah.
a lack of training.
A lack. Well, that's what I think it is. It's a
That's
lack
what you
of
were.
training.
That's what you were saying. I mean, like that. There's just a lack of pastors. And
Yeah. So if I leave the established church, quote unquote, for a house church,
Yeah.
because I believe in house churches. I mean, I lived in one
Right.
for 10 years. But if I leave it for the wrong motivation,
Yeah.
and I think
But
that is so dangerous.
The scenario that Muhib's talking about, Mark Gungor is an amazing pastor, marriage counselor, and his son, the Gungor band. They were in churches, but then they decided that they couldn't do it anymore for whatever reason, so they did a house church to kind of do it their way, the way they thought the
Okay.
church should be, kind of like what you're saying. And then there's like a loss of faith, largely a loss of faith, and
Right.
if not entirely. But I'm not trying to overstate their predicament, but
Right.
that's an interesting thing, and maybe that's speaking to the trends you're talking about.
Because every believer is beautiful creature in God's eyes, But when you don't have the structures, so you can have beauty without a structure is like invisible. You have the beauty because you are in Christ, but now you don't have the form, the order. You don't have the structure, the teaching, like you can be in China, in Asia.
It's like high quality paint left in a bucket.
Right.
I'm trying to
That's
think.
the
I'm just
illustration
trying
you
to
go
think
for.
with you, Muhib. What?
Yeah, that's the illustration you go for.
Like
Terrible.
beauty without the structures, like it's invisible. You cannot see it because
it deserves to be somewhere. Like,
deserve-
it needs to be
nourished,
somewhere.
taken
It
care
needs to
of.
be shown off.
Right.
Like,
You know.
like a painting goes on the wall and there's special lighting for it. Well, the church is the house of God
Yeah.
for the people of God. And God's like, these are my trophies of grace, right?
Right. So like
That's how you were going with that.
we're
Yeah.
going somewhere here.
You
know?
redeemed it.
So-
No.
Okay.
But like seriously, like the approach here, we're not against you gathering, assembling, because the definition of the church, the called out ones, the people that assemble in one place to glorify, praise, worship, Jesus, and teach about what Jesus is teaching, and they all have the Holy Spirit. They're baptized by the same Holy Spirit. It's not the place. It's not. I was listening this morning actually. I took a break. Like this guy speaking about the church. In the New Testament, the word church is never building. Like the meaning of the word is not a building. It's
People,
not,
right?
It's people. A community of believers.
So what is it? What do you think we should be getting out of church, or what should the church be for us then? What is, because you're saying we are the church,
Right?
So why go to church? Maybe that's a pointed kind of question we could
I mean,
handle.
this is a big question, because I think a lot of people are asking. We find people that are church hopping.
Yeah.
You go from one church to another church to
or
another church.
conferencing or concerting.
Yes, and this is like what becomes my spiritual, who I am in my spirit.
Or YouTube becomes my church. Like
Yeah.
YouTubing.
But I think we find that people are just they are searching, they're sublimating. They're not happy with their church, so they go on YouTube and look up some of these great preachers and teachers that are online, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But they don't find themselves
should be supplemental.
belonging in a home. They don't have
Community.
a family. They don't have a community they belong to. And I think that people need to stop asking the question, what can the church do for me? Because it's that kind of attitude that I go into a church that is going to be missing something that I want.
Right.
And that as soon as I figure out what that church is missing, I'm gone.
All right. Okay.
Right. Like I mean, we teach that in our ministry. Like I need a pastor teacher.
That's important,
like,
yeah.
I need a pastor teacher. I need to know my spiritual gifts. I need to realize growth. Like the fact that I'm a believer, that's growth. I grew like from dead, I'm alive now in Christ. That's growth, But there is more to it. I go from glory to glory. So all these things I can discover in the church. I discover my gifts. I discover my pastor teacher. I get to know him.
I think God's involved with that. Yeah.
Right.
Like leading you to a church.
Yeah.
I like that. I like thinking about it that way.
And we can actually be more liberal and say, in the church, I discover how to leave the church.
How to leave the
How
church.
to leave it.
Like
right.
the transition period.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something.
And we also teach that, actually.
So
Like maybe I'm not supposed to stay, you're saying, in
Right.
a church, but I'm supposed to have a ministry.
Yeah.
And it's very possible that, in a church, there could be somebody who is a pastor, but they haven't realized it because they're actually not in the church.
right.
And if they were a part of a community, I mean, I'm teaching practical ecclesiology, which is, what the church is.
yes, this semester in our
this-
Bible college.
In our Bible school, yeah. And it's, I think that people just, they don't know their gifts. They never experience it. And there's people that are missing out. Like a great potential they have inside of their faith walk with God.
Right.
know?
Which I love about our school is that we've got such a practical side to it with like getting into ministry.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a great.
And I think, our school promotes people going out, and what do we call it? Like going out on, we say the mission field, but what's another way to call it? Like you can find yourself almost, like people go out, and you could say that they go out before they're even qualified.
Right, right.
I mean, when I first started teaching maybe, or when I first started being a missionary, like, was I qualified? Did I have all my stuff together? It's like, absolutely
It's
not.
part of the journey, I discover things.
Well, we have practicums set up for that, and there's like guidance counselors, sort of.
Yeah.
So they will kind of get you in a place that fits your. They'll talk with you. What do you think God's calling you to do? In what ways have you served God, and you've really got it really clicked with you?
Yeah.
Because what happens is we become a part of that community. And when I'm a part of a family or I'm a part of a community, this is a word that people don't like. It's like I all of a sudden have responsibility.
Yeah.
You know?
Another thing I discovered in the
That's
church
a good one. Responsibility. Huh.
that I think that's one of the biggest for me personally. Like that's something I discovered in the church, that the church is not perfect. The church is always run by sinners, by people that are not perfect.
Yeah.
That's like it changes the perspective. Like you said earlier, I go from looking what the church can do for me to like, whoa, okay, the church actually has problems,
Yeah.
So I want to be like,
And how to handle
The
that.
gro-
How
growth
do
that-
we respond when the church has a problem? It's so important. How do I respond?
yeah,
Because actually, I think what happens is I see the problem because maybe God has called me to be a part of the solution.
Right.
You know, like this is such an important part of my life, and I have such a conviction about it. Now God's asking me to step up.
Yeah, there's usually something on my end that I could do about a whole lot of given situations, right?
Yeah.
And that includes my, life in the church.
But the church not being perfect is not an excuse for me to accept being abused.
Right.
You know,
No.
it's like a big,
Can you say that again?
the church not being perfect is not an excuse for the church to abuse me.
Yeah, there are abuse. I mean, it's like it's a position of authority,
Right.
and authority can be abused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can be the victim. So I'm not like to accept being victim.
So there's the responsibility of the church governing body, and then there's the responsibility of the church assembly, right?
Right.
Those people within the church, they have a
Yeah.
responsibility. The congregation, and so, like, if I need a pastor teacher, I need a community of faith,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm going to dig in and find my place,
Yeah.
and not just leave the first opportunity that presents itself.
Yeah, and I need a system of like, okay, if I'm being abused, I need a place to go to. You know, like we have in our church government, there are channels of like like a committee like outside of the church to check the church. Which is like we are self-governing ourselves. In the church, but also there are people outside the church who are we chose to trust them.
Yeah.
Like if our pastor teacher goes wrong, we can reach out to them to check the situation.
Well, we treat the church like family.
Yeah.
Like the church becomes our family.
Yeah.
So it's like, you stick with family. Family, it's not like it's a little bit more family are a little bit more significant than coworkers or neighbors. They've got that place where it's like
Yeah.
I'm sticking through tough times with you. We're gonna figure this out. I'm digging in for the long haul here. And maybe people need to treat the church more like family.
Versus, like a job, I can quit and leave.
Right,
Throw the
exactly.
towel in, find something better.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And it's interesting when you're finding your gifts and maybe you're not allowed to exercise your gifts in the church.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
It's a tough spot to be in. Yeah.
It's a tough spot, but if you're part of a family versus like a business,
Maybe you can talk about it, right?
Yeah.
If you're in a family.
yeah,
Maybe you can create a space.
yeah, or you're patient.
Or you pray. Yeah, you pray. Yeah. Pray. Yeah. That option.
What's prayer?
Yeah.
Because there's no immediate satisfaction in prayer. So
Yeah. Let's see. I'm still wondering though. You kind of dismissed the question because you said
Ask it again.
because your argument resonates with a lot of people. I am the church. The New Testament had house churches. I could just do a house church. And of course, if I'm going to do a house church, I have to be a little bit more selective of who I let in through my front door. So I'm not going to let the guys off the streets in my house necessarily. But my house church is probably going to be a small group of friends.
yeah,
And maybe that's not going to really get me to the cross, which is the central theme
Right.
that the church maybe only the church could really justly introduce to me. So maybe that's a good starting point. Because the church introduces you to the cross. I don't know.
Yeah.
The church is going to bring up themes and subjects and that I'm not going to necessarily bring up with my friends in my living room.
Because at the church you're gonna exercise forgiveness. You
There's
learn
gonna-
about
yeah.
forgiveness. You're gonna be rubbed the wrong way. You really gonna get offended.
So there's no real attractive reason to go to church, it sounds like.
Well, no, but I love this idea, that's, like for me to be challenged, like a lot of people believe that challenge means that it's bad. Like pressure is bad, but actually pressure and challenges is what causes me to grow. You think about an athlete, what do? They exercise, and what's happening? There is pain, there is sweats, and what the result is that there's growth, they're stronger and healthier. And if we want to be healthy people, I think we need to be challenged in our life. And a challenging environment isn't going to be me on my couch, with a bunch of buddies talking about something that we like talking about, I think it's going to be something where the Holy Spirit is leading a pastor teacher. And then this is the other thing, that I find myself under somebody who has a certain way of thinking about the Bible. So not only am I receiving this kind of thought process, where I'm being challenged, but I'm also receiving a consistent way of thinking, which is causing growth in my life. Versus me church hopping or being in my living room, I could receive many different, doctrines and many different kind of thinking, but it is, maybe easy to swallow, but it will not produce any fruit in my life.
Mm.
I love this verse. Paul, whatever you said is right. I was following you, being challenged, and, he said, but speaking the truth in love, that we may grow up in all things unto him, who's the head, Christ. Like
We got to grow up.
Like we grow in
Yeah,
Christ.
we grow, yeah.
But there's like in love, like, there's truth is spoken to us.
And kids don't grow up on their own. There's parents involved, right?
Yeah.
So the church kind of could function as like spiritual parents in a way for
Yeah.
a time. There's that phase for sure. Discipleship. That's discipleship, right?
Yeah,
And then you become something, a disciple. You grow, and then you shepherd.
yeah.
There's like there's a generational thing.
And that's what God desires for us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we see in the Bible.
And that's where it's like, I need the church. It comes to that, like, just like I need my family. I need my parents. Like, where would we be without, like...
We often hear it. Our pastors from the pulpit, they would say, my marriage is saved because we are in the church.
My marriage, yeah, right. Like yep.
A church saves marriages.
The real life implication of being in a church.
A church delivers a teenager from addiction.
Right. What a
Right.
youth ministry could do to some teens and
Right.
a family.
A church gives a sense of purpose, a higher sense of purpose. Because at the church, the imperfect church, I get encouragement. I get love. Like
Yeah,
like
amazing.
I find a vision bigger than myself. Like I'm not alone. Like we're not alone.
It's amazing how the church does serve people. I mean, like you were saying,
Yeah.
like we shouldn't go to the church thinking what it does for you, but it's so obvious how much the church actually does do for people, and
Yeah.
you can just, and our church is very much like that. Just come and be served, which is like pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
And to be honest, because
Where do you get that in the world?
because we have flesh, it's really easy to make the argument as to show not to go to church. It's so easy actually
Right.
because we have flesh.
Yeah.
But you said it, the challenge. Like a believer in Christ needs that challenge, and the church.
And I've heard it put this way too. Like, what are we replacing church with? It's probably a TV show. And it's like
The Avengers,
Right. Yeah. Like
Baseball game.
Right.
a sports event. Yeah, exactly. And
Or my sense of rebellion, I don't want it. I don't want it. I mean, it's just that the
Yeah.
flesh,
But I'll say this too. I mean, I think people, they could stand before us and they could have a very good excuse for leaving the church.
Right.
And what do we say? We kind of, I don't know if we can say anything like that's not right. We can say that. Maybe we can point to the Bible and see how the pastors are accountable.
well, I've got
But-
friends. Yeah, I mean, I'll just talk from a personal level. Like, I got friends that are not really in any churches right now, and it's like, I guess I've just decided to not make it an issue in my relationship with them.
Right.
It's like I'm gonna keep being who I am with them, loving them. Like, were they my friends just because we were at the same church at one point, or are they actually my friends? And no, they're my friends. And I just kind of realized, them no longer being in the same assembly with me anymore doesn't really have anything to do with my relationship with them. And it's like understood mutually, and it's like that doesn't interrupt our relationship at all, and that's kind of awesome. I'm happy about that.
Not to change gears, but it brought something earlier we discussed before the show. Why do we have denominations?
Yeah.
Because of freedom. Why do people leave and we still kind of with them, and we have that sense of community, and we are not shunning them, we are like loving them?
Well, like
Because-
Dennis was saying, like we really can't really tell them what to do in that
Right.
situation, and they might have just cause or something that they don't want to communicate, or they want to keep private, and there's something behind there for them not going.
The biggest reason
Pulling out.
for
What?
people to that I see personally, I see it like people get offended, they leave the church. Abuse not being addressed, they leave the church.
Stuff like that.
Like being
when you talk to
offended or
people on
being
the
abused.
street, That's definitely what you see.
Abuse, and that because I know you have interest in the urban church, like that this whole area of financial accountability in the church, in the urban church, you know, like is not precise where the money is going, or some people think the money is going to the wrong place, so they leave the church. So it's like the mistrust.
Well,
Just a
all right.
side note, I'm glad our pastor doesn't drive a BMW.
Yeah.
He used to, but an old one.
It was
So,
a
right.
beater.
I mean, we just being real, like
Now he's got a really ugly dump truck.
Yeah, he's got a, yeah.
So,
But
where is the money is going? I don't know, so I leave the church.
Let's see. What you were saying about freedom, and I really love that. Like, the church should reflect God, obviously. And so if God is not like a manipulator, then the church shouldn't be manipulating. And the denominations thing, like there's so many types of churches and styles, and like that, some people that drives them crazy. Like, no, there should just be one church. They should all look the same. That's, and it should be fashioned the way I think it should be fashioned. But we're saying, actually, there's so much diversity. I mean, and there's a reason for that. It's like that's like the nature of God. That's the nature of His creation. In creation, there's so much diversity, and in church life and in church practice and activity, there can be so much diversity.
When I accepted, when I became a believer, one of the things I discovered that as a former Muslim, we had these entities that represent the faith, Sunni or Shia, like these big, organized entities. Like I had to go through them to know my faith. But in Christianity, because of freedom, there is no like one single entity that represent the entire Christendom.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is amazing, actually. Like that.
Right. So for you to be a Muslim, you would have to either be one of those two categories.
You have to go through them to know the interpretation of something.
One or the other, you're saying, right? Yeah.
But as a believer,
someone just hands you a Bible.
Yeah.
And then figure it out, kid.
Start swimming.
It's like, okay, figure it out. But also, I mean, they are orders, of course. Like
yeah.
Like,
no, what's amazing, right, being spirit taught.
Right.
And like I actually saw that so vividly in someone's life. It really stuck with me. Like I was taking him to church, just met him at door knocking, and he said he started telling me scriptures that like he was like pointing out to him and bringing him to tears. And they're like these amazing key verses that we are like, they're memory verses for us. And I'm like, how did you find that? Like that's gold. Yeah, that's good stuff that you found there. And it was like the Spirit was like leading him. And he's like, yeah, it is finished, the finished work. I am complete in Him. I am a new creation. These were the verses that he was just pulling out of casually reading through the New Testament.
Wow. Right. But
so being Spirit taught, right? Not institutionally taught, but spiritually taught.
Yes. I don't want to miss my thought, but I probably have already. But like I say that because freedom, you mentioned it, like Christianity is not owned by a denomination.
Right.
Like that's why we need to labor in defining the church from the Bible.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying all that because sometimes the culture, and I know this is an area you like to speak about. Sometimes the culture, the culture likes to define the church.
Yeah.
And kind of like, and the culture would
Pete
like.
Buttigieg, cough. No, sorry, that's a Democratic nominee. No, not nominee. What are they called?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
He's running for president.
I thought you just coughed.
He's running for president. Sorry.
No, this is good. So the culture would like you to accept a definition of what the church is. Would like the world system, we say. But
let me just give an example.
Okay.
Pete Buttigieg, he's running for president as a Democrat. And he's challenging Mike Pence's Christianity.
Okay.
The vice president. And it's like, you don't get much more Christian than Mike Pence. Where does this guy get his Christianity come from? And his accusation to Mike Pence is like, I don't understand how he could be a Christian when he has something against, homosexuality. And I'm like, okay, look, you could try to make a case for homosexuality if you want, but to say that, where does he get that from? We could go to the scriptures pretty easily and find some verses that give you a good reason for saying homosexuality is wrong and marriage is defined between a man and a woman.
Right.
So it's like, it's really a joke. And that's where the culture is like on this thing about homosexuality, and they're like, we're pushing this through, and we'll even call it Christianity.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, the culture defining.
Yeah. It's like the homosexuality, even let's stir this more even, a woman pastoring. Sometimes the culture would like you to accept it. We are very fundamental on that. We know from the Bible. We can have the debate. It's not biblical. But no, the culture.
But they can do a darn good job.
They do. They like to put pressure.
There's some women that actually like to ordain because they're very good preachers.
I mean, they can, of course, they can teach.
I know.
But it's like, this is a subject. What is the church? The purpose of the church. Like, these discussions we need to have. But also, we have the culture. There's
as long as they're done respectfully, but like, yeah, exactly. Like, and I don't mind people coming up with a different opinion or perspective. I mean, I'm not going to say this is how we do it just because this is how we've always done it.
Right.
I'm going to say, all right, let's see.
Let's think about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's go to the Bible. Let's hear from the Spirit of God.
Yeah.
But it has to be more than me just saying, let me hear from the Spirit, right?
No,
It has to be me.
subjective.
That's subjective, and I could just pull any kind of thought I have from the hat. And if I have like a group of people large enough, I could start applying it, and I could start a new trend.
Yeah.
Or I could go to the Bible, and I think that's what a lot of people are actually seeking.
Yeah.
They're actually seeking like an Acts chapter 2 kind of church where there is preaching, there's an anointing, there's salvation, and there's discipleship. I mean, as soon as people are in an environment, where you're being discipled and you're being loved as you are, I find that people are actually, a lot of these other things kind of that we could say are big issues actually become very small because we're dealing with a real issue.
Yeah.
Like, I think some of these issues are small. When I was living in after high school, I worked at a United Methodist church, and I was, one of the youth pastors, and the organization sent in like another youth pastor, and she was over me. And I remember like me being fundamental and me trying to deal with it and me being so angry.
Right.
But it's interesting that somehow, I had another covering over me, so I stayed in that position. And it was interesting how even to this day, like, we are still friends.
Right.
Like, something so fundamental can be a big issue if I'm not focused on what actually is important, and that actually is the word of Christ, that is discipleship, that is lost souls.
Right.
And I could make an argument, like, are these issues real? And I would almost say no if this is happening.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, we can have the discussion about it, but at the same time, there's love.
Urban ministry, it's like we don't have time to nitpick at these things because the needs are so great before us, the needs of the city. The countryside church, they've got all the time in the world.
Yeah.
There's more cows than people out there. And so they've got a whole lot less pressure and issues to immediate issues that are facing them. So yeah, they're going to say, hey, look at us, what we're doing, and we're going to compare ourselves as being a better church from the church down over the hill. Because, we kind of need you to hang out, stay with us. There's not too many of you to go around. So, but in the city, it's like there's so many needs. Hey, you know what? That's not my style, but all more power to you. I don't care if you're half a block away from me because we're in a city of millions of people, potentially.
Yeah. Yeah. That brings up like an interesting topic and something similar to what you're thinking.
Yeah.
But in this idea, like, maybe as in a country where we're so well off, like, do we make issues bigger than what they really are? Like, we all have lived in a different country, And to me, it's so interesting, like the simplicity of the Christian life in a different country.
That really does affect you. Oh my gosh, yeah. So we were doing a little village outreach in Romania, and this pastor had been ministering there for years, close to 10 years, and he couldn't get everyone in the village to come together for a Bible study because they all had issues with each other. And that was like, oh my gosh, mankind has issues. Like they've got nothing, they've got nobody, they've only got each other, and that should be the perspective.
Yeah.
And this should be a community thing, and God should be a centerpiece that brings people together.
Yeah.
And that's what the church is, right?
Yeah.
But you know what? It's like the sin nature, and it's the flesh.
Yeah. Acts 6. Issues bring courage in the church to speak out. You remember Acts 6, the situation,
The widows caring for the...
So like the church, like we have the courage to speak out, to address what is wrong. I don't know how in the village, how they address that,
Well, you know what? That poor minister, I mean, he just kept going faithfully every week and did like 7 Bible studies in 7 different houses.
Wow.
And that just was his role and style. And he was never going to get that village together.
Paul the Apostle would write 2 piercing epistles to the Corinthians, addressing 95 problems. You see, like
bunch of issues.
He say, let's put it in the table, talk about it.
That's an approach. Maybe
Hey, you guys want me to come and in person? Like he's had that tone,
Maybe, you just need the right character to get in there and flip a few tables.
But God bless that ministry. He did what the 7 different Bible studies, like time consuming, the effort, the energy,
Yeah.
But it's like...
But, I mean, like, you could say there's an issue there, but the reality is that people, like we were saying in the beginning, were face-to-face with the cross. Like, they understood who God was. They had to walk with God.
The church is like supposed to be like a glory center.
Yeah.
Like all hands up, and it's like, God, all the praise and glory go to you. And like, just imagine Spurgeon in his heyday, right? Preaching to God knows how many people, and they're coming every week.
At the age of 19, I think he started, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Thousands of people at 19 years old.
He's a deacon, just...
Like something's got to stir up people to get out to church. I was just listening to Tim Keller talk about what happened in New York City after 9/11, and all of a sudden, he said his church never went back to the same size. That was a growth spurt. He was already doing pretty good, but that was definitely a growth spurt after 9/11.
Yeah.
And on the spot, he was like, he just talked with the worship team, said, "Hey guys, I think we need to squeeze in an extra service today. Do you guys mind hanging out for a couple extra hours?" And they said, "Let's do it." And so he's like,
That's cool.
So he just said to everybody, he said, "Hey," because the place was packed, he said, "Come back in 2 hours and we'll do another service for you guys." And 900 people showed up.
Wow.
That's awesome.
He's been doing 2 services ever since.
I don't know how many.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, he's got 6 or something churches now, so.
Like a satellite.
Yeah,
Okay.
in New York City. Right, exactly. Like a need for God brings you to church. That's good enough for me, right?
Yeah.
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 All right.
Versus what we've got in America, like you said, I mean, we're just in abundance, overloads,
Consuming.
stimulation, consumer. Yeah. Rich out the wazoo, ridiculousness.
Yeah.
$1,000 a cell phone. I was in Kansas City, and not trying to hit on them out there. We got our issues here in Baltimore, but it was like a lot of churchianity, like all these like hip youth groups, and it's like I'm clubbing. It's Christian clubbing. I mean, it's like I'm gonna go just have a good time Friday night at the youth group.
Yeah.
And
like,
they've
does it really matter what my pastor wears or what music is being played? Is that the real issue?
Yeah.
Or can I be in a place where the Bible is being taught and there's an anointing through the Word?
That's
I think some people could be like, my youth pastor's cool, or my pastor's cool, look at what he's wearing, look at the songs. We got to change our songs, or people aren't going to come to church. And we can make an argument for or against that. And in a lot of churches, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I have like my opinion about music, But it's interesting. Like, what if somebody went against my opinion? Would I
Yeah.
still sit in a church and listen to a message that is anointed?
Like essentials and non-essentials. Like
Yeah.
it become a discussion about these two elements. Like what is really important, the big picture and the small picture.
The church could really be clutch for what we're going through as a country today, and that's kind of my bottom line. I'm thinking like,
Yeah.
we need a savior, obviously, and it's not Donald Trump. Preach. No,
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's not a political figure, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's Christ. And
Yeah.
that's where the church comes in.
Yep.
Right? So
Yeah.
we've got that gravity, like the sacred duty,
Yeah.
that the church has, and that's the bottom line for
And
me.
I don't think we can use the excuse, well, in the latter times, many people will fall away. Like, why can that be what I fall back on, when nobody's coming to my church?
Yeah,
I mean,
know.
maybe I could say, like, oh, maybe nobody's coming to my church because, my hands aren't dirty,
Right.
Or, I mean, you could fill in the blank, but I don't think we should use that cop-out. Because we are the answer in one way.
Yeah, evangelism really confronts you with people's issues, and I like that about evangelism. Like, people are like telling you straight up, they don't care what you think. They're not
Right.
going to see you again. They're going to tell you what they think about the church or their experience or why they don't believe in God or their issues with God, because that's a lot of what this could be too,
Yeah.
And I don't know, evangelism over the years really helped me, think like, okay, what do people need? Where are they at? You got to feel for the people and what they're going through. Evangelism, it's kind of like, yeah.
Because I think you have it in your notes, the church is not just for us. So I think somewhere in your notes, I don't know, I found this. I kind of that kind of hit me in the heart.
The church is not for ourselves. Yeah, I got
Yes.
it here. This is in Redeemer Ministry philosophy of ministry.
Yeah.
Tim Keller's church. Yeah.
It's like we find ourselves in the church, we find our place, we grow, but it's beyond us, like that's where gospel-centered church, they go out, they reach out,
Yeah, I like I was working in a church, and I just kind of sat. It was a traditional style and build, and I kind of liked it, so I kind of sat in it just to enjoy, because they're made a particular way, and I was thinking, about it. And first of all, the benches, they're uncomfortable, and second of all, the halls are grand. And there's like a reason for that. In the architecture, there's architectural intent, and the hall is grand because it's supposed to bring you to a God that is grand,
Hey.
and the chairs are uncomfortable because you're not supposed to be comfortable in the message.
Wow.
There's something that's
Like a
supposed to
philosophy behind
yeah. There's something that's supposed to hit you.
That's true.
It's a message. The message is supposed to hit you, and the atmosphere is supposed to cause you to worship.
Yeah.
It's amazing, like, because we got the training in Bible college about making sure that the sound is heard, when you preach, the place is
The
comfortable.
acoustics.
The AC, it's like
Oh, yeah.
like really making sure,
Make sure as a preacher you're comfortable.
you're comfortable and the people are comfortable too, so they can hear the message and there's like no distraction. It's just the opposite, like philosophy, like
Yeah.
the approach, That's why we
Yeah,
have
well,
denominations.
I love this old guy that's in our church now, and he was going to a really nice church on a different part of the city, Baltimore, and he left the church because he loved. I mean, we're doing missions, we're on the streets, we're in people's lives, knocking on doors, and he sees that that's where we put our money where our mouth is,
Right.
And but this other church that he was going to, they're upgrading speakers and chairs, and that's where he sees the money going. He's like, I see the money making this place quite the and so he's like, I'm going to the church that's putting the money where it ought to be, in missions, because
Okay.
that's where my heart is. And I was like, man, I like this guy.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back to what the church is. Like, it's not a building, right?
Right.
I mean, if this property was taken away from us, I mean, would we still have a church? And yeah, we absolutely would.
We're gonna meet at
You know.
Golden Corral. Like, is it
Golden Corral.
I mean, somewhere,
Yeah, because the building itself isn't so important. It's people.
Yeah,
We don't legislate people, we lead people. We don't build a church, we build people.
right.
Like as soon as people are off of my mind and they're no longer the focus, then what am I doing? Am I building myself a kingdom? Am I, enjoying my authority? Am I enjoying my social club? I
Yeah.
think all these things are a reality for many people in any church. Doesn't matter what church it is.
Yeah, the Psalm 16, we love the saints, like David said it. Remember that psalm? Like, because of the saints, I'm showing up because of the people in the church, actually.
Yeah.
Like to encourage them. Like, hey, this is really important. I'm going to show up. So,
There's something about corporate worship, we got to come together. I think ultimately, like, we're here to worship God. That's what we bring, to glorify God. And we get the message of grace that so contradicts the culture and the world that we live in, right? Like, the message so contradicts our everyday.
Yeah.
And that's why we need it, because we're not getting it at work. We're not getting it at school. Work, school demands so much from us, but God says, like, I'm here to give you like all of me.
Yeah.
right.
And you need it. And it's like, yeah, I do. And the father in the home needs it. And the children in the home need it.
Mm.
Yeah.
And the wife needs it. The wife needs the love of God. And it's like, there's going to be days where I'm not feeling it, like to give that to my wife. But God's got it for my wife. And I'm like, that's good enough motivation for me to get to church. My wife's going to get loved because maybe I don't have it the way I should. I'm going to get loved so I can have it for my wife the way I should have it.
Yeah, it's true.
But, like, what church? That's
What church?
a whole
Finding a
another
church?
subject.
Finding
Like,
a church.
finding a
Right.
church,
But I
I
think
don't know
it's
if we have enough
important-
time for that, but
Yeah.
I think it's important for us just to realize, like, the church is a place of worship. It's not there is a reality of somberness when we go into this grand kind of church, more traditional. A couple months ago, we were in Lutenberg, visited Luther's, church that he preached in. And you
Right.
go in, it's like, it's kind of somber. You're like, looking like, wow, and you get this idea, and it's kind of cool. But on the other hand, I think church is a place of worship where there's joy, there is fellowship, there's like all this great stuff happening,
yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that was cool, huh? Germany? You were
Yeah,
there?
that was great, yeah.
Oh my gosh. So amazing.
This requires more than an episode, right, guys? Because we just like addressing why we go to church, but what church,
Well, yeah, I've talked about this for, 14 weeks, 2 hours a night,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's a
You
lot
getting
of
anywhere
time.
with them?
No, I haven't. I think I'm in the first chapter still.
Oh, yeah?
Not getting very far at all, but
Yeah.
it's a big topic because it's so important in our church.
yeah,
What are you hoping the students take away from the class? You thought about it?
That's how you're supposed to start the class is
Yeah.
what do you want them to take home? And then that's what
Yeah.
you're supposed to reinforce. I work backwards.
Oh, really?
what do we take home?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to realize, like, how a church works, how a church functions, like in the structure, but also more importantly, like in the family, in the community, that how this is. And I think the biggest thing that I've had is that the church should be a place of forgiveness. Just like you said, Muhib, in the beginning, like sinners are in the church, sinners are running the church. They're going to sin. They're going to make decisions you don't like. And if I can learn to be mature in my walk with God, and I can say, I forgive you, or maybe forgiveness isn't needed, but I can ignore this decision, then people will go far with God because, the reality is no matter where we go, it could be in a business, it can be in our marriage, we're constantly face to face with things that are going to rub us the wrong way,
Yeah,
and we need to learn how to deal with that. We can't run away every time there's a little problem in our church or in our marriage or in my job.
and to make it practical, the way we deal with that by seeking counseling. Like a lot of people like think.
Yeah.
I know I don't want to change the subject, but it's really practical.
No, it plays in. Yeah.
I'm offended. I'm offended. I have
Yeah.
problems. I really want to leave the church, but we say, brother or sister, before you leave, ask for counseling.
Yeah.
Give it another chance.
Yeah, or as we were told, wait, just
Take your time.
You're
What's the
angry
rush?
right now.
Right.
Just wait and then see what God does.
Yeah.
Not
Don't-
a good time.
Don't
to be
leave
making,
and make a denomination.
making big decisions.
I want to start a house church probably tomorrow night.
What is your motivation?
I want to be popular.
Yeah.
Because like we're not I hope we're not coming out beating them up because you can start the
No,
house
they
church,
want-
but the motivation we're just addressing motivation.
I'm gonna
issues here.
guess. I'm gonna guess those people want us to speak to the issue
Yeah.
because the issue doesn't get spoken about.
Right.
Maybe the church will say, "Hey, you should be coming to church. What's so difficult about that?"
Yeah.
But the people that are on the outskirts or that roll out for just peace out for a while, they're like, "I don't see you wanting to talk about what I'm going through, what's bothering me."
Yeah.
So that's hey, let's talk about it. That's a part of the why we've established this platform is to get the conversation rolling.
Yeah.
When we did the relationships episode, some of my friends that listen were like, we got so
Yeah.
into it for hours
At
that,
work,
that
yeah.
Friday. It was like a Friday, I remember, and they were just like getting into it at work. Yeah, exactly.
We need part 2, I guess.
So
Yeah.
I know. So
We should get some single people. Oh, some single people in here.
yeah, we got one. But we get the conversation rolling, and people get fired up about the subject, and that's good enough for me. So
How
Yeah.
much time we have?
We're done. We're done.
We done? Okay.
yeah.
Hey,
All right, you can go to
should,
bed.
Should we
Muhib.
do a word to our sponsors?
A word to our sponsors? Yeah, and that's it. Hey, that was fast.
This
no,
coffee sponsored me staying awake.
no commercial breaks. I mean, they're all trying to get in here. Nike, Apple. We
Yeah.
said nope, commercial
No,
free,
no.
guys. Sorry.
Commercial free.
Keeping it real.
Awesome.
All right, thank you for our live viewers on Facebook. We're happy
Oh, wow.
about that.
Yeah, thank you.
Shout out to those peeps. All right.
Hey, we're back on the schedule, right?
Yeah,
Somewhat.
Yeah.
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 You know.